Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee to start evaluating and looking at this thing. It was tasked with creating a comprehensive walk bike master plan through the town. Since 2018, there's been a lot of things that have gone on in town. A complete streets policy was adopted. A number of road safety audits have been conducted, and education safety campaigns were developed. In 2025, this year, we were hired by the town of Madison and BPAC to assist in developing this walk bike master plan that you'll see tonight. Our project goal from the start has been to enhance the town's facilities and infrastructure, making biking and walking safer, easier, and more accessible for everyone. Our timeline, we started this project in late winter of this year. We conducted a community survey, which we'll talk more about. We have 2 public meetings, this being the second one. The first one was to get a lot of the input that really spoke to some of our recommendations. We evaluated the existing conditions. Right through the beginning of the study, we started looking at these, and that's reviewing plans that have been developed, the earlier master plan that was done, all of the road safety audits. And it was important that we had a good canvas of what's been done. Some of the things that we found were replications or slight variations on certain strategies. And then there were strategies that we saw might have been incomplete or could be connected to one another. We then went into the recommendation phase, and that's where we are now. So we've taken all this information, we've assimilated it, and come up with a series of recommendations and tried to refine those recommendations to discrete geographic areas, and you'll see how we did that. Once we are done here, we'll finalize our master plan and our implementation matrix, which we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Public outreach in the open house, that was our first public event, and some of the big takeaways we got with concerns that you all had was the lack of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and what came up quite often was driver speeding. Some of the key locations where more biking and more walking facilities were desired was, of course, along Route 1, the downtown area, the shoreline, and the Green Hills Road school campus. So from there, I think I'm going to take a break and let Chanel come up, and she's going to talk a little bit about the survey and some of the key findings we had in the survey.
Thanks, Dave. So we conducted a community survey starting in late April to May, and we got a total of 412 responses. Okay. And from that survey, we heard some key concerns. And for walking, some of the key concerns included lack of pedestrian infrastructure, such as sidewalks and crossings, as well as distracted speeding or aggressive drivers and poorly maintained sidewalks or street conditions. For bikers, some of the key concerns that came out of that survey was insufficient designated bike lanes, distracted drivers and speeding, and poorly maintained roadway or bicycle pathways. So those were some of the key concerns that we heard during the community survey. And then we also asked about what are some priority improvements that you would like to see. And so for walking, some of the priority improvements that were identified included more sidewalks, dedicated pedestrian paths, specifically off-road, enhanced speed and safety enforcement, and you'll see that's pretty consistent with bikers as well as driving with the enforcement, and then improved crosswalks, curb ramps, and signal timing. For biking, some of the priority improvements were the dedicated protected on-road bike lanes, additional off-road bicycle paths, regular maintenance and street sweeping to clear obstacles and debris, and enhanced enforcement measures for vehicle speed and safety. And then for drivers, their priority improvements were, again, that dedicated protected on-road bike lanes, the enforcing traffic laws for cyclists and pedestrians, as well as educational campaigns for safe biking and walking practices, and then additional signage so that they can be aware while they're driving. From the survey, we also start to identify some of those priority locations and destinations. And you'll see this is really similar to what we heard at our first community meeting and our open house. So the priority locations were Route 1, the Shoreline, downtown Madison, and Green Hill Road in the schools. And the priority destinations for biking and walking connections were to the beaches, downtown shopping areas, the town green, and the farmers market, and then the schools. So a lot of overlap here, and we're seeing pretty consistent responses. So once we had all of our public engagement and outreach, and we collected some of that initial feedback on what people's priorities were, we went in to collect our existing conditions data. So we collected data on trails and greenways, and this gave an idea of where potential connections could be formed, as well as transit and train and bus stops, bicycle and pedestrian crashes, key destinations in town that people would like to get to. And then we also reviewed previous studies, such as the road safety audits and assessments, to see what previous recommendations could be moved forward. We also looked at previous complete street projects and ongoing projects so we can understand what's coming up already and then how can we build on those. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Hannah to go over how we got to our recommendations. Great.
Thank you, Chanel. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm going to talk through our recommendations and our process for how we arrived at those recommendations.
Lower the mic so we can hear you better.
How's that? Is that it? Is that better? Sure. Okay. Okay, so for our recommendations, we went through a pretty thorough evaluation process. So as we said earlier, data collection was very important in this process. So this included a review of past bike and ped reports, such as the road safety audits and assessments, the Safe Routes to School report, and various bike ped safety connectivity studies that have been done over the past few years. We also conducted a public survey and hosted a public meeting. We then took all this feedback from the community and the recommendations made in past reports and compiled all that information and then evaluated the feasibility and appropriateness of those recommendations throughout town. And since there have been so many different bike and ped studies that have been done over time, we did find a lot of the times that either information was redundant, like maybe there was overlap in study areas, or even that there was conflicting recommendations made on different facilities. There were also gaps between recommendations, so we tried to identify those as well and create a more cohesive network. And we worked very closely with the steering committee, which included town staff as well as members of BPAC throughout the process to really home in on a list of practical, context-sensitive recommendations. Next, we conducted a prioritization analysis. So we took that list of recommendations and we considered key factors for each of those recommendations. So these included things like high-level cost estimates, timeline for the project, connectivity to existing infrastructure, connectivity to transit, and safety and accessibility. And lastly, we organized all those recommendations into a project matrix, which we'll look at later, which the town will then use as a tool when going forward when pursuing future bike ped improvements. So now we're going to talk through some of the recommendations that we'll see throughout our plan. So our recommendations include several types of facilities. These are, first we have multi-use facilities. So these are shared use paths, multi-use paths, paths that run parallel to the roadway, shared use trails, and these are traditionally wider than sidewalks. So they can be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. For pedestrians, we have various areas where we're recommending dedicated sidewalks throughout town, particularly connecting to existing sidewalks and extending the network that already exists in town. For bicycle facilities, there are some limitations on what facilities are most practical on certain roadways. So largely, we're recommending fog lines be installed throughout town. These are also known as shoulder lines. So that middle picture on the bottom row, you can see that white shoulder line in there. And so the fog line helps to narrow the vehicle travel lane from, say, 13 or 14 feet to 10 feet as appropriate, given the context of the road. And narrowing the travel lane has the benefit of slowing down vehicular traffic, and it also creates a paved outside shoulder that if there are bicyclists or pedestrians who desire to use that, they have the option to use it. In addition to painting the fog lines and narrowing the travel lane, we're also recommending sharrows, which are the pavement the pavement marking you can see in that image, and bike signage to be installed, in addition to adding the fog lines and narrowing the lanes. And lastly, there are some roadways where we're recommending installing dedicated, separated buffered bike lanes as appropriate. Other types of recommendations include traffic calming measures. So these are measures to help slow down vehicles, narrow the travel lane. We understand that was a concern in town. So we really wanted to make sure that we were specific about where traffic calming could be implemented to help with that. So some of the traffic calming measures include installing textured pavement to crosswalks or at intersections and installing speed radar feedback signs. You all have seen those. They flash at you with your speed, and they also display the speed limit, so that helps to slow vehicles down as well. And lastly, we have various intersection recommendations. These can include the installation of RRFBs. These are pedestrian beacons. RRFB stands for Rectangular Rapid Flashing Beacon. So you push the button and the sign flashes, and that warns approaching motorists that someone wants to cross the road. We also have locations where we've recommended high visibility crosswalks with ADA compliant ramps, as well as pedestrian push buttons at various signalized intersections to so have dedicated crossing time for people at those signals. So we're going to do a high level review of the recommendations around town. And I'm going to be going through these quickly. That's only so that way you can see this high level view, but you can look at all of the boards, and those show a much closer look at all these recommendations. So first we have the multi-use recommendations. These are, again, facilities that can be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. So this includes side paths, multi-use paths, and trail extensions. So we have several locations, such as along Green Hill Road and Cox Road, where we're recommending a side path. A side path, again, is just slightly wider than a sidewalk, can be used by both bikes and pedestrians, and generally runs parallel to the roadway. And we're also recommending that the trail that exists near the school campus area and Bauer Park be enhanced for bike suitability, and that an extension be added to connect to the new Neck River Elementary School. There are also some areas near the surf club where we're recommending some multi-use facilities. And lastly, we have a recommendation to extend the Shoreline Greenway Trail along Route 1, which would connect from the trailhead at Webster Point Road near Liberty Street towards downtown Madison. Next up, we have locations for pedestrian recommendations, which are sidewalks. So there are lots of locations where we're recommending sidewalks. In general, sidewalks are recommended near the school campus area on Green Hill Road, Cops Road, and Mungertown Road, between downtown and the surf club, in the Shoreline area, and then in that commercial area along Route 1 in East Madison. Some of these are new recommendations that have emerged as part of this plan, and some of them are actually already being designed and are planned to be installed, such as some of the sidewalks along Route 1, which is very exciting. Next, we have bike recommendations. So all of the pink, magenta shows the roads where we're recommending the addition of those fog lines, which again would help to reduce the travel lane to 10 feet and expand the shoulder, and also adding in sharrows and bicycle signage on that road. And we tried to find roads that would create a north-south connection through Madison as well as east-west. So we were connecting destinations for long lengths as possible. There are also a few areas where we are specifically recommending, because there is available width, sharrows in one direction and a bike lane in the other direction. Next up, we have locations for intersection improvements and traffic calming. So intersection improvements can include things like adding in additional crosswalks or reconfiguring an intersection to make it safer to navigate. For example, at either end of Liberty Street. Those are some pretty tough intersections to navigate, as well as installing pedestrian push buttons as appropriate. There's also several locations where we're recommending traffic calming measures to help slow vehicular speeds, particularly in the school campus area and in the Shoreline area. Lastly, there are some roadways that are particularly challenging or have some complications. and would need to be studied more closely to determine what types of bike ped facilities would be appropriate and what could help to further connect Madison. So these include Route 1 west of downtown, along Neck Road, and Durham Road, Route 79. And when you put all those together, this is an idea of what the future bike ped network facilities would look like. So again, we went through this pretty quickly, but all of these are represented on the maps around the boards, around the room, and we just wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to peruse them at their own pace and at their own speed. So we took all these townwide recommendations and we did develop those maps that you see around the room, so you can get a closer view of several key areas in town. So there are 4 of these maps in total, and this is, for example, the shoreline network. So there's a lot to digest here, but this, again, shows the same information we went through. There's multi-use facilities on here. There's areas where we're recommending the sharrows, sidewalks, et cetera. So these are broken up into both short-term and long-term recommendations. If you look in the bottom right corner of the screen, you can see a legend. So those correspond to each of the numbers that are on the map. So in the short term, these are recommendations that aren't very complicated to design, aren't very expensive. They don't require land acquisition, and they don't require coordination with state or federal entities. So those include striping of those fog lines and reducing the travel lane, adding in sharrows and bicycle signage. For the shoreline specifically, because it is such a high bicycle pedestrian area, installing signage that is specific to that area we thought was appropriate for this context, adding in traffic calming like those speed radar feedback signs and speed advisory signs. For long-term recommendations, these are more complex to design. They might require land acquisition, and often there are additional challenges that come with installing these recommendations. So these include a lot of the infrastructure recommendations, like adding in crosswalks, sidewalks, curb ramps. If the town is interested in installing a raised intersection or some additional traffic calming measures, side paths, multi-use paths, etc. So we've done the sort of short-term, long-term mapping exercise to show a much closer view of the townwide recommendations. And lastly, we took all those recommendations and we developed this implementation matrix for the town to use going forward. So this lists all of the recommendations that we've mapped. It's a little more specific about how, like, the lengths of roads, for example, Cox Road between this area and this area, we recommend this. And this also, most importantly, identifies some key factors and criteria that we looked at in development with our steering committee. So those include implementation criteria and challenges. So time frame, if there's any land acquisition that's required, if there's any coordination that needs to be done with the state or with federal entities. And then we did a high-level estimated cost for each of the recommendations. Then we have safety and accessibility, ADA compliance improvement, if there's a particular intersection improvement that was made. And lastly, we have connectivity. So if there's connection to existing infrastructure or to transit. So we went through all of the boards, all the recommendations, and we itemized all of these, which the town will then be able to use as a tool to sort. So when grants become available, they can go into this spreadsheet, essentially this matrix, and sort, filter, and see which recommendations have been made are most appropriate for certain grants as funding becomes available. So now we're going to have time for everyone to circulate around the room and take their time to review all of the boards. If you have any questions, we'll be stationed near the boards to take those. We also have index cards and pens at everyone's tables. And if there's anything that you really like, anything that we missed that you want us to consider, please write those down and we will collect those cards. Our timeline for this project, we've developed these recommendation maps. We're in the process of finalizing them. We're in the process of finalizing the implementation plan, and the report will be done in the next month or two. So,
Quick question.
Sure.
Are these pieces of information going to be available online for offline review?
They're on the story map. So we have all of those maps on the story map. We have printouts of this. So yes, they
Is that
will.
on the town website?
I think there's,
Yes, so through the bike pedestrian committee's
Yes,
page?
through the bike committee's page, there's a link to our story map, which also talks through everything we talked about tonight, and we've got all the maps there.
And you can get to that through this.
Yes, you can. There is a
Great.
brochure on your table, so if you're interested in visiting the bike pit website, there's a QR code on that as well.
So for those attending via Zoom.
Yes, and for those attending via Zoom, we'll provide a link to the story map, and you can put any of your comments, questions, et cetera, in the chat. We'll be monitoring it, and we'll be able to go through those as well. And we'll also have the boards are available on the story map right now.
It doesn't appear that we have chat, so my recommendation would be if they're looking through, we have raising hand capability, so I could take actual comments this evening.
If
or
you're
we
on,
can
if
take-
you're on Zoom and you have a comment as you are reviewing the maps, please raise your hand. We'll be monitoring the chat, and we'll be able to answer your questions or address any comments.
Yeah.
Can we raise our hand here?
Yes, I mean, we want to have everyone have time to review all the maps and we'll be stationed to take questions. If there's ones that are very high level, then we can take them right now, but.
Are the
specific
short-term
ones-
items already approved and ready to roll out, or?
No, so this is an action plan for the town to then use to start pursuing some of these types of projects. So these aren't set in stone. This is, everything would still need to be designed, implemented, go through a more robust process. This is a map for them to use to understand what projects to pursue.
That's a great question. At the Board of Select Board meeting, that question came up because you'll see some of these recommendations. These are not designs. These are planning. We've identified planning desires to connect the town. Many of these would have to go through a design process. So there's another step before many of these get implemented. And as Fiona mentioned earlier in the presentation, some of them have already gone through that process, have been designed. You'll see Rob's got lots of work going on already. And there's a number of things that are being designed right now as well. So they're in all different stages, but certainly if you see something and you're worried that it's going to go through your front yard, for example, those things would be evaluated during the design process.
So if they're in the design process, are they on this list somehow denoted as such? Or how do you know that they're in the design process and moving on to that phase already?
During our existing conditions evaluation, we've identified all the projects that the town currently has underway. So we don't have it in this presentation, but it will be part of the report. Right now, the town, each year, engineering department puts out a complete streets report, which goes through things that they've accomplished for that year. And also, the engineering department also can identify things that are in design and with some future implementation. So there's a lot of different scenarios. There's not, it's not the same cookbook for every one of these.
Sure.
Well, I have a question about the methodology. Data should inform decisions. Now, did you interview 417 people? I think I saw
422.
412 survey responses. Yeah.
Well, how were they selected? I mean, if 400 of them live on New Road, then they would say New Road needs sidewalks. It appears that it's so much along the shoreline and southern, So my question is, how valid are the 422 responses if they all came from the same neighborhood? That's all I'm saying.
So that's a great question. And one of our survey questions did ask people to identify where in Madison they live. So we do have a breakdown of those demographics. So we're able to see that we did get a pretty diverse response from people in northern Madison as well as southern Madison. So we do have a good spread. Those priority destinations We've heard them time and time again, not just from the survey, but also the open house. And it seems like that's where people are mostly wanting to go. So making sure that we're having key connections to those locations to start. And then later on in the process, we can kind of expand out. That's why we have like Evaluate 79 as a first study, because that was a priority. It just wasn't the top priority. So, yeah.
The other thing is, this was advertised, we didn't pick the respondents, so we didn't choose who was gonna fill out the survey. It was broadcast through various means, and anybody could have taken it.
That's my point. That's my point.
So I think now, if you all would like, you can feel free to go to the board. You have note cards and pens on your table. I also set some over by the board. If you have any comments you want to leave, can write them down, or we'll be standing by the board for any further comments or any questions.